wonder what would happen if you woke up with a superpower? Or what about if a perfect stranger on the street came up to you and called you by a different name, but it wasn't your given name, and it happened more than a few times? Well, these are the things that happened to my next two guests. I'll tell you all about their journey and how they were guided along the way, coming up. All right, I have two amazing guests with me here for Guided, and they are M and Miss M. So let me tell you a little bit about them. So Miss M is a world-renowned psychic, medium, and oracle for the Earth Liberation Movement. She's worked exclusively on global transformation as an interdimensional telepath, remote viewer, and psychic intuitive, relaying mission-critical information to the Liberation Front on the ground as a liaison, and to the Lemurian Council and Galactic High Council. So she is an amazing spiritualist, and I'm going to have her introduce you, or introduce herself rather, and give a little bit more background, an in-depth background. And then M, he has actually worked with a lot of different agencies in government, more than 20 years in international banking with a network of top bankers, officials, heads of states, and agency relationships that he still continues today. Furthermore, he holds executive level positions in several blockchain technology development companies and is deeply involved in improving global solutions across an array of technologies. So we'll get involved with that portion of his background as well. But let me first tell you, you can, and I will post the individual websites for both of them to get more of their videos and kind of what they do, because it's fascinating. I went to both of their websites and found their videos, and it was really amazing. But let me start by saying, you know, now that we have an overview of both of them, let me start with Miss M, since we started with her background. When did you find that you kind of had these superpowers? I mean, as a psychic, did you just wake up one morning and say, wow, I have precognition, or I know about this or that? Introduce us to that part, Miss M.
Okay, well, you know, I always had strange activity around me, like, throughout my whole life, but I didn't really get fully activated as a medium or any of the other skill sets until about 7 years ago, when my father was dying of cancer, and I was introduced to a medium by a client of mine. And it was actually spending time with him that activated me. It was being around his frequency. And when I met him, he told me I could do what he could do, and that I was going to end up doing that eventually. That would be what I did for a living. And I didn't believe him. I thought it would be awesome to have, you know, superpowers, but I didn't think for like a second that was going to be my life. And he told me, you know, multiple times, look, this is going to happen to you. When it happens, you're going to think you're going crazy, and you're not. I want you to call me. I'm going to help you. And it was like that. It's excuse me, sorry, those itches. I kept spending more time with him socially and in sessions, and the more I spent, the more things turned on for me. And then all of a sudden, it was like, you know, I always had a kind of what I thought was an eccentric inner monologue that did different accents, and then all of a sudden it was in like different languages, and I was like, hey, wait a second, like I don't speak that language. And I was smelling things that weren't there. I was feeling everything. I was working as a high-end hairdresser in the Bay Area at the time on like tech executives, and so I was just kind of like living my life. And like when I would touch my clients, it would be really intense. So they were coming to their appointments, and all of their loved ones were coming with them, and it was just like an emotional roller coaster. And I thought I was losing my mind. I thought maybe I have a brain tumor, maybe this is it, I've finally gone crazy. And then I remembered what he told me, and so I figured, okay, I'll give him a call and see if he can help me before I label myself a crazy person. And so began my journey, and it just kind of went crazier and more wild from there. It's a really long story, but that's basically the beginning for me, when I started having more abilities kind of activated. And a strange thing too is that over the last few years, anytime I encounter somebody with a different ability than my own, that frequency gets activated in me as well. So I've been picking up new skills over the last few years as I've been on this like crazy spirit ride.
That's amazing. So, how have you handled receiving those and feeling comfortable in your own skin with those beautiful skills? Because, you know, somebody who is all of a sudden activated and they may not have those spiritual guides to mentor them, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. Well, I have to say I didn't get too much help. I got a couple of pointers. It's important that when you start opening up your energetic field, that you have some means of protection or know when to shut down. So that's kind of like what he helped me do. Was I became this just walking open channel that was just exposed to every feeling and every thought and everything I was around, and it was very overwhelming for me. And so he just kind of taught me how to shut it down by incorporating crystals into my life, by incorporating meditation, by, funny enough, like putting a pillow over my head while I was sleeping. When it first started happening, I didn't sleep for 2 or 3 weeks straight. Because that's usually when the activity is higher, and so there would just be a lot of chatter at night and a lot of spirits like poking me and wanting to talk and deliver their messages, and so I would literally put a pillow over my head to let them know that I was closed for business. And it's funny, I heard later that I'm going to say it was Sylvia Brown. She would wear a hat all the time, like when she would wear the hat when she wasn't open for business and then take it off when she was ready to receive. So somehow covering your crown can kind of help with the way that the messages are coming through. And it's also important that you start to, I mean, the more sensitive I become, the more sensitive I become to this environment. So I had to give up, the regular indulgences that humans have, like alcohol and coffee, and I had to drink a lot of water, and eventually I had to give up eating meat and animal products just to maintain the frequency. So I live a clean life without any chemicals or synthetic, fragrances, and I don't use any chemicals in my home or on my body. That was another thing that had to go. So the better you treat your body, the more pure your temple is.
We're going into buildings all the time. We're encountering people all the time. And I think sometimes we don't know how to shut it down or how to protect ourselves from those psychic vampires and that energy. So I think that's great advice. Or somehow communicating to spirits, other entities. Sorry, we are closed for business right now. So that's good. And let's go to you. So when did you start this spiritual journey? And I know you've worked for a lot of government agencies and all of that, but when did the trajectory of your life kind of change, and when did you feel guided to go a different direction?
Well, actually, at a very early age, I was getting tuned in to the voices that were in my head. Much like Mrs. M, I went through a path of having a lot of communication, which actually shut down in mid-30s. They told me that, they're not going to communicate to me anymore. But so starting at 17, I would say, is when I really began to explore why I had certain abilities, like ESP and, of course, the voices in my head. And so when I went to work at the Pentagon when I was 23, I actually was visiting metaphysical bookstores in DC and trying to meet spiritual people. And I was very, aware that I didn't like where I was working, especially when I worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency. I had a keen awareness to where other nefarious things going on there. Just energetically, it felt very challenging, and I wanted to get out of there. And so I made a request to get a different job, and so that happened about 6 months after working there. But yeah, the past life remembrance was another thing for me that really began in my mid-20s, I would say, and the detailed past life remembrance rather helped me uncover the material that I do around the seventh seal, that symbol up there. I channeled in when I was 25, and I was really accessing a lot of mystery school stuff from ancient Egypt, and it was just very clear to me, remembering lifetimes there, and so it was very challenging to have a foot in both worlds, as it were, to be a computer programmer at these different places and be waking up so fast.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Now, when they said we're not going to communicate with you anymore, what did that mean exactly, and why?
Well, they told me that I had matured enough in my spiritual path and that I didn't need their guidance anymore, and they pretty much said, you're the master now.
I see. Okay. So is that typical, or was that just because of your specific journey? Because I know for some others, like myself, there might be a set of guides that will almost graduate, so to speak, and then there might be a new set that come in for different aspects of your life. Is that just maybe something that happened for you?
I'm not really sure if that's typical or not, but the two ascended masters that were working with me basically indicated that, it was just time for them to stop giving me so much guidance. And I also had a lot of real significant ET contact. I went on board a mothership, consciously awake, and so I was shown and told about the role that I would play in the future, and I think that it's different for each of us, but in my case, I think that I did a lot of work in past lives as well, and so this is one of the reasons that I woke up so early. I'm 55 now, and so this was, some 33 years ago when I was 17, and I was kind of alone for a very long time, wondering when am I going to meet the tribe, I always had a knowing that there would be this, spiritual mission mate counterpart that would show up, and I've been putting the clarion call out for others to show up for some time, and we're beginning to see, a wave, almost a tsunami of consciousness sweep the planet now, and so I don't feel so alone anymore.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? I just feel like the soul tribes are coming together. It's so neat, and activating each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been like a long reunion over the last couple of years.
Absolutely. So the viewers who don't know, I'll just say that I met M and Miss M through YouTube, through social media, and I was watching one of these types of interviews, and a lot of what they were saying really resonated with me, and I just thought I really would love to meet them. So I heard about the Transformational Shift Conference in Sedona, and I had the honor of meeting both of them, and thought it would be amazing to have them on Guided, because the information will, I'm sure, resonate with you as well. So let's get back to the fact that you do so many important things that impact humanity now and will continue to impact humanity in the future. So both of you receive a lot of intel for what's happening today in government and the shift that's going to happen as far as the global financial reset. Take us through what we can expect and how we can ready ourselves.
Well, I think it's important to mention we started Deep Disclosure because we wanted to help people get the insider track on what's really going on, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yes.
We're fortunate to get, we have some pretty high level insider intel from agencies about what's really going on, and these are the white hats, the people that are working behind the scenes for the positive outcome for humanity. And of course, then the other aspect is Miss M brings through galactic information that is so accurate. It's really quite mind-boggling, because we would be told things a month. Well, for a while it was a month, and then it went down to a week and down to a couple days now, over about a 4-year period. But they would share insights about things that would happen, and then they would happen. And so that really, probably was designed to gain our trust and confidence. And now we're completely in tune with exactly what's occurring. And frankly, right now, it's Christmas time, and the government is shut down, and there's some high-level operations going behind the scenes right now that we can't say too much about, but they're, along the lines of what everybody's been anticipating with the Q drops and the other types of things that talk about the dismantling of the deep state.
Yeah, I would say that, our process is unique in that I receive the information, and then we go and validate it with our agency and military people. This is a double confirmation of the stuff that we're getting. And so, but as far as like what can be expected, we are part of a very small group of people working on the financial reset. So there are many different factions of people doing financial stuff, but we're really part of a very small group that's doing it. And a lot of what's been reported has not been accurate. In that it's constantly changing, and that I'm referencing some of the stuff when it comes to like RV stuff. That's not exactly what's happening behind the scenes, and it's a little bit different. We're working with governments and central banks and the leaders of all the major countries to do this for the people. So there's a bigger thing going on in the financial world involving not involving civilians, not involving like direct disbursements to people, which I think a lot of people are expecting because of what's been talked about on the internet for so many years now. But there is a lot of reason to be hopeful. There's a lot of amazing things happening, and 2019 is looking like a very good year for the Alliance and for all the people of this planet. So we're really excited about that, and we are excited to do some project funding in the future with what we've accomplished and what's happening and what's had to happen in order for us to find success after all these years working on this is to align ourselves with the other factions of the Earth Alliance to remove the deep state so that we no longer had blocks in our way. So we, in our attempts previously that we've made to move funds, they've been stolen, we've been blocked, we've had people who tried to work with us have been threatened, they've been killed. It's been a really kind of dangerous endeavor that we've taken on, but the light, we always knew the light would win, and the light has won. And now it's just a matter of taking out the trash and beginning the rebuilding process. And so 2019 is like a new renaissance for humanity. It's bigger than the Industrial Revolution or the Renaissance that happened back in Italy. This is going to be an amazing year for technology, for progress on all of our systems, social and governmental and legal and in the medical field as well. So we're really, really excited for everything that's happened over the last few months and what it means for everyone over the next 1,000 years.
That's really
Absolutely
exciting. Yeah. Now, you mentioned, Ms. M, that you know that there's misperceptions on the internet and things like that. What specifically do you mean? Like, because what's coming to mind for me is like, people are looking forward to like the TDA accounts and all that debt to be basically wiped away and for our abundance to come through. So what types of things are you specifically talking about?
Well, and I could even take that because I have people asking me all the time who I'm speaking to in relationship to finances, and you wouldn't believe the number of calls I get pertaining to The RV is supposed to happen tomorrow. In fact, there was a big hype up again right around the holidays. It's going to happen, and there's going to be the 800 numbers, and there's going to be lines at the bank, and we just don't believe that that's correct. And I end up telling those people I'd be shocked if it happens. And of course, those of us are the audience that's tracked this. How many times over like a 9-year period now have they heard it's going to happen? It's been 100 times, if not more, and
Right.
it just has not happened. And that's because, what we talk about on our show is a lot of these things have been set up to disempower the people. To have you sit around and just believe that a check's going to be in the mail instead of being active with your transformation and even at a local level with your community, getting engaged with things that can happen right now.
Yeah, and I think so. When it comes to, of course, we would like to eliminate everybody's debts, and we are starting with debt elimination on a government level in order to get money flowing into the economy to start rebuilding infrastructure and paying for humanitarian projects in those countries. So it's just highly unlikely that they're going to be like individual entitlement checks cut for everybody, and it's kind of, I think it's disempowering to embrace that idea anyways. Now, I understand that when we are born, there's a birth certificate created and a bond created, and they're making money off of our names. But I mean, that money doesn't really belong to us. It doesn't belong to anybody. It's being created out of nothing. So if we're sitting around and sitting on our hands waiting for our entitlement checks because we believe we should have this money, and we're not really living our incarnations to the fullest, and we're not embracing our own power to manifest and create things. So I think we need to move away from expecting that. Like, it's obvious that things have gone wrong here, and so many of us have come here to change that. So that is the reality. But we are the ones that are changing it. We are the ones that are fixing it, and we need to embrace that and stand up and do the work and get it done, and stop waiting for someone else to save us or to punish someone else for wronging us, for a perceived injustice, for money that was never real to begin with. So we need to move past that and really step into our roles as creators.
I agree. I think it's a victim type of mindset, and I think you're right. We don't live up to our full potential as creators. I love that. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask both of you, was there any resistance to your spiritual gifts, your spiritual superpowers? And if so, how did you circumvent or navigate around those?
Do you have any, resistance?
I didn't have any resistance. I kept asking for more. And I mean, the only thing was feeling awkward and not feeling like I had a support team,
Yeah.
You can't really tell your parents. They think you're nuts. You try certain friends and roll the dice, but ever the more so people are waking up, and I feel that, there's far more support teams embracing who you can become, and these are the important messages and means of reaching people. That we're out here. We welcome engaging, awakening, and in response to the last thing too. I mean, we definitely want to empower people funding their projects, and we're working on cryptocurrency solutions, and we'll provide wallets where we're going to disperse funds for projects, and so we really do see an abundant future. And if we can do that with more conscious and spiritual people, the better.
Right. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I resisted my gifts. Like, it was, I denied the ability that I had. I didn't think I could do what I could do. I didn't believe it was really happening, and so until I was able to embrace the fact that I was really doing it, it didn't expand any farther. And then I just kind of had to trust myself and start using it. But I did have a hard time accepting my mission, and that is really just because it was a lot that they asked of me. Like, they told me everybody was going to think I was crazy, that I was going to lose everything, that I wouldn't be able to explain myself, and if I did, then people were just going to think I was more crazy. And I experienced that. I was offered rehab by my family. People have thought that I left and joined a cult or started a cult, or it's so there's definitely been that challenge. And even though I know we know we kind of came here for a mission, we came here for a job, but then you start living your life and you're like, wait, that doesn't sound so enticing. And so there's this process Matthew and I both went through, and Matthew, everyone knows his name now. We both went through where they made us agree again. So, you agree in the first, before you come here, that you're going to do this job, and that's what your incarnation is for, but then they make you agree again while you're in the physical. And so it took them about a year to get me to agree to do what I'm doing right now. And I don't know how many times they took you up to get you.
Well, I only remember one time, and I was in a silver room sitting on a bench, and this ascended master was walking back and forth. Some would know him by the name El Moria, and he kept stopping and looking at me with these big blue eyes like, are you going to do it? You said you would. I need you to say it again. Do you agree? Are you going to do it? And I was a little hesitant. He paced a few more times. Serious, this is really important. Are you going to do it? I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
Was it telepathically, or did he literally say it
This
out
was
loud
in a
to you?
dream that was very vivid and lucid, and and I knew when I woke up, like, oh my God, I just agreed.
Yeah, and most of them do communicate telepathically. They don't. They don't bother moving their mouths when they're talking to you, and some of them they can't. The first contact that I had was with Lao Tzu, and it was like his frequency was so high that if he had spoken to me in his regular voice, it would have like crushed my body. And so he was like whispering to me, but it sounded like a shout, and it paralyzed me. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. All I could do was just lay there like a plank and listen to what he was saying.
Good point. I wasn't looking at the lips of this gentleman, so
yeah.
I was like, wow, look at those eyes. So maybe he was in my head. Who knows?
Yeah.
Those are amazing experiences. I think also what I've found when I meet people, with such beautiful spiritual gifts too, is they tend to feel isolated because they don't have those people to share these experiences with. And like you said, oh, my parents are going to think I'm crazy, or, so-and-so is going to think I'm crazy. So it's nice to have those like-minded people to run into, or somehow our paths cross. So it's just nice that we find our soul families, So yeah, it's just one thing that I keep hearing over and over, are people saying, I just feel so isolated because I feel like I don't have anybody to talk to about these things. So we need to get this stuff out. So thank you both for helping with that. I remember you told me something, or you told one of the audiences about, I think, a time traveler experience. I wanted to hear about that.
Well, okay. So I had a gentleman that got inserted into my life. I thought he was really whacked and weird, just like we just said, what people must think of us when they first see how out there we are. And I was 25, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy thinks, this, that, and the other thing. And until I had a sleepover at the lady's house that introduced us, and she says to him, so are you going to take me to the Palladian system tonight so I can accept that job while I sleep? I'm a university teacher. And I'm thinking, And so he goes, yeah. And so we all had our separate rooms and went to bed after about 5 hours of conversation. And I had this bizarre dream where I was experiencing virtual reality in such a vivid way, and it was one thing we were talking about. I was very interested at the time of how can we teach, the mystery schools and stuff like that through virtual reality. And anyway, I woke up in the morning and this lady stuck her head in my room and was like, well, I went and you went along and they had you in a room. You were testing their virtual reality equipment. And I was like scooping my jaw up off the bed sheet because I'm like, oh my God, this all just happened.
Wow.
And so that was how, I became acquainted with this time traveler who we hung out for about a decade, and I could write movies and tell volumes of information about the things I experienced with him. But the main thing is, he blew my mind by saying that I was a time traveler too, and that if we didn't get this right, I'd have to go back in time to Egypt and start all over again. And boy, that kind of put the fear of get it right into me real quick.
Wow.
I don't want to repeat 1,000 years or 2003 or whatever it was.
Yeah, he was just really a wealth of information. And I didn't have the opportunity to meet him when he was here, because he's since passed on. But a couple of years ago, we were living in another desert, and I started channeling these pretty crazy formulas, and I'm drawing these graphs, and just a little background. I almost failed high school because I was getting a D in geometry, so I'm not really that great when it comes to math, at least not anymore. But I'm getting all this stuff and I'm writing it down, I'm drawing these graphs, and I'm like, and I take it to Matthew and I'm like, what is this? And I start explaining it to him, what I'm creating here, as the person is explaining to me, and he recognized it as Rendell's work, and so it was something that he referred to when he was here as metavariance. And it's a really advanced math that takes the golden mean ratio and breaks it down into kind of like pie shapes, and each one of those pies has a different formula, and once you have all of them, you can create matter out of nothing. So it's the formula for the divine source code, which is really interesting because Matthew is also working on that based on like a number basis, like the actual numbers that make up the source code. And so it's really interesting stuff, and he was very, very instrumental in, I think, this whole thing, including the revelation with the pictures found in the sealed tombs in Egypt of us, and some other modern items that really solidified the time travel aspect of what we were doing.
And if you want more detail on these subjects, you can find them on deepdisclosure.com and the segments that we have there. But yeah, he definitely encouraged me because I began writing my books, 22 years ago. And he was actually saying some really powerful things about the content that I was turning out and tapping into, and was saying that these books were already well received universally. Like when he slept,
Wow.
he was awake on the other side, traversing about, involved in, like he was the head of, there was an asteroid that was hollowed out, and it was like an Alliance space station, and he was the director of that. So when he slept, he was up there conducting meetings and stuff, and would come down here and tell me about everything that happened. But yeah, he was telling me they really were encouraging me with my material.
And I think one thing about him that's really fascinating, and it speaks also to this like fear that we need to release around technology, is that Rendell was initially an android. He was a
Spacian is what it's called.
Spacian.
Yeah, and from one of the first races, like billions of years ago, he was made to travel and explore, and then he gained sentiency. And actually, they called themselves lords then. The lords of karma tried to take his experience and his ascension, and he went to a court date and won, and got to keep all of his experiences that gained him his
Consciousness.
his ascension into higher levels of consciousness.
That's fascinating. I mean, it really does take on so many levels of, as above, so below. And, you still have to go through court cases and court battles, even in different dimensions. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, the hierarchy continues.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, one story I tell about that's so profound is he was, chastising them and saying, who appointed you up there, you lords, and why do we have to call you Lord and all this? And after he won this case, a week later, I went to a channeling, and it was a Lord Michael that was coming through, and one person asked a question, Lord Michael, would you? And he goes, just call me Michael.
That is so wild. Oh my goodness. Okay, I cannot believe that 40 minutes has already passed us by, 30 to 40 minutes, and I would love to invite you to come on for another segment. I have a couple things in mind for you, and I'm going to email you about them, but this has been so fascinating to me. Both of you are absolutely amazing, and I want to hear more about, in fact, my last question will be about the difference between dreams, like knowing you're dreaming versus knowing you're astral projecting. So for instance, when you have such recall and you have these feelings that make such an impact on you when you awake, how do you know? How can you differentiate between a dream and astral projecting or
just
jumping timelines?
Mark on one thing. One comment that I think dovetails very importantly, and that is I hear Miss M often talk about waking up within the dream and then waking up again within that dream,
Yes.
and then realizing finally that you're awake, right? And that was the same thing with me when it all began, some 25 years ago. The same thing happened where I had a series of awake within dreams episodes, and right around that week or couple week period, I had some of the most horrendous activations and ability to have recall and other, gifts came online. So I think that's one of the high telling signs.
Yes, and for me, I often remember my dreams. I'm a very vivid dreamer, but these ones are way more vivid, and there's the colors are brighter. There are things that just, and the emotions are so real. It just the sensory like overload that you get from these let you know that you're not just sleeping, and the recall that you have when you wake up, it's a lot more precise and a lot more clear than if you had just been sleeping. And of course, there's physical stuff that goes along with it too. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'm tired because I've been out all night, or I wake up feel like I just ran a marathon and I have to chug like a gallon of water.
Exactly.
I'm so parched, I'm gonna die, and so those things will happen. And also, for some reason, your physical body gets sore even though you leave it behind. So if you're running around and fighting and doing all this stuff or flying, you're gonna feel it in your physical body the next day. And so that's a common thing for us who travel. And
Of course, then there's bouncing back into your body.
Yes.
They drop you
Yes.
off, or however it is, you jump back in,
the
and
re-entry.
and you literally can spring out of the bed
Yeah.
from
Yes.
impact.
Like you
Yeah.
crash back in and you're jolting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those are all good indicators that you've been elsewhere.
Yep. Oh my goodness. You two are so amazing and fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me, and I look forward to the next time that I have you on. So have a beautiful
you.
rest
We're
of your
super
day.
excited.